13 years. Not 13 games, not 13 moments. 13 years of waiting while others celebrated. 13 years of taking hits that never showed up on highlight reels. 13 years of wondering if the moment would ever come. Jerome Bettis didn't need fame, he needed closure. Born in Detroit, drafted by a team that wasn't home, sent away before the story even found its direction, forced to build a career far from where it started. Season after season, the question followed him, quietly but relentlessly. Will it ever be your turn? The body slowed, the carries disappeared, and the league started moving on. Then came the final season. One last chance, one last mistake, 1 inch away from ending everything, and a Super Bowl that wasn't just a championship game. It was waiting for him, right where it all began. This isn't a story about stats or speed. It's about patience tested to the limit. About a man who waited so long that destiny had no choice but to meet him where it all began. You're watching Black and Gold Legacy. If you believe the greatest victories are earned slowly, like, share, and subscribe. Because some legends don't chase greatness, they endure until it finds them. Built by Detroit. Before Jerome Bettis ever wore black and gold, he belonged to a city that understood toughness better than most. Detroit wasn't glamorous, it was physical, unforgiving, and honest. Bettis grew up surrounded by grit, the kind that doesn't complain and doesn't quit. Football wasn't an escape for him, it was a reflection of where he came from. Every carry felt heavy because that's how Detroit life felt. At Mackenzie High School, Bettis wasn't the fastest kid on the field. He didn't glide past defenders, he went through them. While others relied on speed, Jerome relied on balance, power, and patience, letting blocks form, then finishing runs with force. Coaches noticed something different. He didn't just run to gain yards, he ran to set a tone. That mentality followed him to Notre Dame, where tradition and pressure walk hand in hand. Wearing that uniform demanded discipline, and Bettis thrived in it. Against elite competition, he became the same unstoppable presence, a back who punished defenses late into games. By the time the NFL came calling, Jerome Bettis already knew who he was. He wasn't built for highlight reels. He was built to wear teams down, and unknowingly, he was already being shaped for the city that would one day become his true home. Drafted, then displaced. In 1993, Jerome Bettis heard his name called in the NFL draft. For a kid from Detroit, it felt like destiny lining up perfectly. Drafted by the Los Angeles Rams, a team that once belonged to Detroit but no longer felt like home, it looked like the beginning of something special. Bettis delivered immediately. As a rookie, he ran with power, confidence, and purpose. Defenders bounced off him. Fans took notice. The nickname "The Bus" wasn't marketing, it was reality. Once he got moving, stopping him took more than one defender. But football isn't only about talent, it's about fit. The Rams were changing, the city was changing, and slowly the role Bettis once owned began to shrink. Systems shifted, philosophies changed. What once felt secure started to feel uncertain. Then came the moment no one expected. The Rams decided to move on. No farewell, no long explanation, just a trade. For Bettis, it wasn't just a transaction, it was displacement, a reminder that the NFL rarely waits no matter how hard you run. He had proven himself, yet somehow he was being pushed aside. At just 24 years old, Jerome Bettis was already learning a difficult truth. Talent can open doors, but it doesn't guarantee belonging. And somewhere across the country, a city built on toughness was about to offer him exactly that. The trade that gave him a home. In 1996, Jerome Bettis was traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. On paper, it looked simple. A running back, a new team, another chapter. But in reality, it changed everything. Pittsburgh wasn't looking for flash. They weren't chasing trends or speed. They wanted football played the hard way, physical, disciplined, unforgiving. And the moment Bettis put on black and gold, something clicked. This wasn't a system trying to reshape him. This was a city built exactly for the way he ran. Every carry fit the culture. Every collision felt intentional. When the weather turned cold and games became ugly, the Steelers leaned on him. When defenses tightened up, they handed him the ball again. The nickname "the Bus" took on a deeper meaning in Pittsburgh. He wasn't just moving the offense, he was carrying the identity of the team. Fans embraced him quickly. Teammates trusted him completely. Coaches built game plans around his reliability. He wasn't asked to be spectacular. He was asked to be dependable. And he was. For the first time in his career, Jerome Bettis wasn't just productive, he belonged. But while he had finally found a home, one thing still remained missing: the ring. When the bus became the standard. By the late 1990s, Jerome Bettis was no longer just a running back in Pittsburgh. He was the standard. Every Steelers game followed a familiar rhythm. When things got tight, when the weather turned ugly, when defenses knew what was coming, the ball still went to Bettis. Not because it surprised anyone, but because it worked. There were games where the yards came slowly, 3 yards, 4 yards, nothing flashy. But then, late in the fourth quarter, defenses started breaking, arms dropped, tackles slipped, and Bettis kept moving forward. One game situation captured it perfectly. Short yardage, crowd on its feet, defense stacked in the box, everyone in the stadium knew the call. Bettis took the handoff anyway, lowered his shoulder, and pushed the pile just far enough. First down. From that point on, his role was cemented. He wasn't there to dazzle, he was there to finish. Young players learned what Steelers football was by watching him. Opponents prepared all week knowing they couldn't avoid him, only survive him. Jerome Bettis became the heartbeat of a team that believed football should be earned, not gifted. But time never stops pushing back, and slowly the game began to push back on him too. When the body started saying no. Football always collects its payment. By the early 2000s, Jerome Bettis had already absorbed thousands of hits, the kind that don't make highlight reels, the kind that stay with you long after the whistle. The power was still there, the vision was still there, but the burst wasn't the same. Carries became harder to earn. Younger backs started rotating in. Coaches managed his workload carefully. The league he once punished was now faster, lighter, and less forgiving. Whispers followed him. He's slowing down. The bus is running out of fuel. Bettis never argued. He never complained publicly. He adjusted. Short yardage work, goal line situations, moments where strength still mattered more than speed. Each season felt heavier than the last, not just physically, but mentally. Because every player knows this truth: when the body changes, the league rarely waits. The body slowed, the carries disappeared, and the league started moving on. He felt it before anyone said it out loud. But Jerome Bettis wasn't chasing numbers anymore. He was chasing something unfinished. And as his role shrank, his resolve didn't. Because deep down, he knew this journey wasn't meant to fade quietly. It was meant to end the right way. One last season, one final promise. Before the 2005 season began, Jerome Bettis made a decision that surprised many. He announced it would be his last year. Then came the final season. One last chance, not to prove anything, but to finish the story. There was no press tour, no dramatic farewell tour, just a quiet statement from a player who had never needed attention. The message was simple: this is it. Inside the locker room, it changed everything. Teammates didn't hear it as an announcement, they heard it as a challenge. This wasn't just another season anymore. It became a mission. Every practice, every hit, every cold Sunday carried extra weight. Bettis understood his role had changed. He wasn't the centerpiece anymore. He wasn't chasing carries or statistics. He was chasing completion. He wanted to finish what he started. There were moments that season that it looked impossible. Losses, doubt, a team still finding its rhythm. But something kept pulling them forward, a belief that this year was different. Quietly, without speeches or slogans, the idea spread through Pittsburgh. Win it for Jerome. But destiny had one more twist waiting, because the road to the Super Bowl wasn't just difficult, it was about to become personal. Destiny brought him home. As the 2005 season moved into January, the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't just survive, they hardened. Every playoff game felt heavier than the last. Every hit carried consequence. And with each win, the idea grew stronger. This wasn't random anymore. Then the announcement came. Super Bowl XL would be played in Detroit. For Jerome Bettis, the weight of that moment was impossible to ignore. This was the city where it started, the streets that shaped him, the home that watched him leave before the story felt finished. 13 years earlier, he had been drafted by a franchise connected to Detroit, only to be sent away before he could belong. Now, after more than a decade of punishment, patience, and persistence, the game was bringing him back. Not for a ceremony, not for a tribute, for one final test. The media called it fate, fans called it destiny. But inside the locker room, Bettis treated it the only way he knew how, with quiet focus. No speeches, no celebration, just preparation. Because homecoming stories don't come with guarantees. The road there was brutal. The Steelers won playoff games away from home, grinding down opponents the same way Bettis had built his career, slowly, relentlessly. And when they finally punched their ticket to the Super Bowl, the meaning was clear. Jerome Bettis wasn't just playing for a ring anymore. He was playing for closure. For 13 seasons of waiting. For every hit his body had absorbed. For a career that deserved to end where it began. But destiny wasn't done testing him yet. Because before he could lift the trophy, one last mistake, 1 inch away from ending everything. 1 inch from losing everything. It was supposed to be routine. Late in the AFC divisional playoff against the Indianapolis Colts, the Steelers were trying to seal the game. The call was simple: give the ball to Jerome Bettis, let the clock bleed, end it the way it always had. Bettis took the handoff and leaned forward. Then the unthinkable happened. The ball came loose. For a split second, everything stopped. No crowd noise, no commentary, just silence. A season built on sacrifice suddenly hung on a single inch. 13 years of waiting, seconds away from ending in the worst possible way. Bettis stood frozen. He didn't celebrate, he didn't protest. He knew exactly what that moment meant. On the sideline, no one looked at him, because they all understood the weight he was carrying. Then, chaos. Ben Roethlisberger chased down the defender and made one of the most unlikely tackles in playoff history. The Steelers survived. The game ended. The season lived on. But for Jerome Bettis, something changed forever. He would later admit that if the Steelers had lost, he would have retired immediately, unable to live with the idea that his final moment was a mistake. That fumble didn't define his career, but it reminded everyone how cruel football can be and how close destiny can come to slipping away. The dream survived, barely, and now there was only one game left. When the wait finally ended, February 5th, 2006, Super Bowl XL, Detroit, Michigan, the city where Jerome Bettis was born, the place where his football journey first took shape, and now the place where it was about to end. This wasn't a game about numbers anymore. Jerome Bettis didn't dominate the stat sheet. He didn't need to. His role was smaller now, situational, controlled, symbolic, but his presence meant everything. Every snap carried 13 years of weight. Every step on that field carried every hit he had ever taken. When the final whistle blew and the Pittsburgh Steelers were crowned Super Bowl champions, Bettis didn't jump. He didn't scream. He stood still. Because some moments are too heavy to react to. He didn't need the ball in his hands. He needed the weight of 13 years lifted from his shoulders. 13 seasons, thousands of carries, one ring. He had waited longer than most players ever do, and when it finally came, it came exactly where it was supposed to, at home. Jerome Bettis walked off that field a champion. Not because he chased greatness, but because he endured long enough to earn it. The next day, he retired. No comeback, no second thoughts. The journey was complete. Jerome Bettis never asked for shortcuts. He didn't demand faster paths or easier endings. He accepted the hits, the waiting, and the uncertainty, trusting that if he stayed true to who he was, the game would eventually meet him halfway. 13 years later, it did. He didn't win because he was the fastest. He didn't win because he was the flashiest. He won because he endured. In an era where careers end quietly and legacies fade quickly, Jerome Bettis walked away complete. A champion in the city that built him, wearing the uniform that believed in him. Some players are remembered for moments. Others are remembered for consistency. Jerome Bettis is remembered for patience. This was the Jerome Bettis story, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories aren't about speed, they're about waiting long enough for destiny to come home. You're watching Black and Gold Legacy, a channel dedicated to honoring the real stories behind Pittsburgh Steelers history. If this story meant something to you, like, share, and subscribe. Because the greatest legacies aren't rushed, they're earned.